Dynasty Decisions, episode 89. You guys know what we're doing around here. We're talking about your Dynasty trades, your Dynasty questions, any of your rebuilding / contending decisions that you have to make. That is what we cover here on Dynasty Decisions. If you guys want to have your team covered, you know the drill by now. If you don't, flockfantasy.com/FSE is how you can get first priority to these videos to make sure we feature your team and talk about all the pressing decisions that you have. Or you can submit via the Google form down below for free, and we'll eventually get to your team. We do have, I believe, 4 free submissions that we're covering in today's video. So some of you guys that submitted your team a little bit ago might get to that in today's video. So Danny, how you doing? What's up?
Doing well, doing well. Yeah, no, I'm just woke up this morning, knew that we had to record some Dynasty Decisions, excited to get out for you guys as well. And yeah, I know a lot of teams have been on the back burner and we're happy to get into.
For sure. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we're going to kick it off with Shabang's team here, a 10-team PPR, 1-point tight end premium, so a 2 tight end PPR, and a 1.5 for receivers as well. So it looks like a tiered PPR with running backs only getting a full PPR, which I haven't really seen too much of. It is a 1-quarterback league, 10 teams, start 9, so a little bit of a shallower league format. Joe Burrow is the main guy there with Stafford on the back burner. Ken Walker as the main running back with Kendre Miller and some other guys there. A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, very good receiver core there. All 3 of those guys, my top 6 of wide receivers. Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Juju, etc. And then George Kittle and Darnell Washington as his main tight ends. Also has a couple additional first-round picks, two ones in 2025, 4 ones in 2024, plus a second there in 2024 as well. So looking at this team right off the bat, it pretty much stands and screams out to me that this is a house money year. You got 4 picks in 2024 in the first round. You have 1 solidified RB1, RB2 type in Kenneth Walker, and Kendre Miller, a guy that I think will probably be more valuable next year than he is this year as well. So overall, looking at this team, I would say you have your solidified quarterback, you have your solidified top receivers, you have your solidified tight end. All you really need is some running back depth, and thankfully in 2024, we got a pretty decent running back class to help you fill that out.
Yeah, 100%. And you basically said in your question that I'm still screwed at running back. I'm trying to go after some guys, but basically everybody I'm trying to deal with thinks that they're contenders and won't sell. If that's the case, like Cory said, just treat this as a house money because next year's draft class, Cory has gone into in depth already with his top 10 overall running backs on Flock. It's a really loaded running back draft class. There could legitimately be upwards of 6, 7+ guys going in day 2 of the class next year. So for you personally, you still got a young nucleus. You still got Burrow there. You still got, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Olave. You still got, for the most part, your team being a nice young, 24 and under type of shell, albeit maybe outside of a guy like A.J. Brown. So for you personally, yeah, like Cory said, treat the year like house money. If your team is showing you some immediate dividends, maybe at that point, a running back might be cheaper to add. And at that point, maybe, like I said, you're 4-2, 5-2. You want to make a push there, maybe use one of those first to go get some production. Sure. But realistically, like Cory said, this should be a house money window. Add a couple of those guys next year. Then you have a nucleus of Burrow, Walker, let's just say Raheem Sanders, Travion Henderson. Then you're absolutely loaded and gunning for a contending run.
Yeah, that's an important distinction too, because if these guys are being really stingy about Dobbins and Pierce and Barkley and these type of guys, there's a good chance that some of these guys are not actually contenders. And once they get to the midseason point and they're 2-7, then they might be willing to deal them at that point. But I would only go after them if Kenneth Walker's still an RB1, Samaje Perine maybe is working into a feature workload because Javonte Williams not on the field yet. Kendre Miller, maybe Kamara got suspended and he's the lead back there or something like that. Zeke maybe is this year's Jamal Williams, and he's just punching in touchdowns for some team. It's possible that your team could actually materialize a little bit sooner than you think, but worst case scenario, you just have a bad team this year, have a mid pick probably next year in the draft, and then you add, like Danny said, Raheem Sanders, Travion Henderson kind of combo to this team.
Yeah, I mean, like Mixon misses some time. I wouldn't be shocked if Ezekiel Elliott was like the natural replacement there in Cincy, to be honest.
I mean, they're like the same exact player at this point in their careers. So he did make a trade, and I mean, you guys know that we love Drake London, but I would sell him for this price too. Drake London, you sent away. So at one point, you had A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Drake London. All 4 of those guys are on my top 8, I believe, Dynasty wide receivers, but you got 2 2024 firsts, a 2025 first, and Chris Godwin, who's no slouch in his own right. And the other thing with a house money team like this, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, and George Kittle, if they're, having monster seasons, Chris Godwin's the wide receiver 5 in points per game or something like that, and somebody's willing to overpay for a guy who's, 26, 27 years old, same with Cooper, same with Kittle, and you can get younger. Maybe somebody is willing to give you, if Godwin's having a breakout season, somebody's willing to give you, and maybe the Drake London manager wants him back or something like that. You could go after a young receiver. Maybe Jackson Smith and Jig was having like a down stretch, but his peripherals are strong, and you could buy low on him if Godwin's having a great season or something.
Yeah, you could definitely buy low on another guy. I was also considering maybe like a move of Cooper plus Kittle in exchange for, let's just say, Pat Freiermuth in a first-round pick. And in that point, you're getting younger at tight end. You're liquidating Amari Cooper into a first-round pick, and both of them are going to be beneficial for you because although you're a house money team, I do think by 2024, that's when your team's going to start fully materializing, especially once you add those backs.
Yeah, and going after Pitts would definitely make some sense with this team as well, depending on his price, which, maybe this league's like in Atlanta or something, given the price that Drake London went for, but it's possible that Kyle Pitts is on the low in most people's leagues. So I would say you're in a good spot. Don't rush things. Don't force it. Don't, trade 2 of your ones for like a mid running back just so you can compete. It's no big deal. You can compete next year. It's a 10-team league, so people's teams are going to be pretty strong. But once you have 2 or 3 rookie running backs on this team to go along with Burrow, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Cooper, all these guys, you're going to be in a really good spot. So we can move on to the next team here, which is from Brian Jones. He said he lost this league last year. He said they used week 18 to determine the points for the Bengals and Bills players. He said he was so close last season. He decided to push more chips in this year and try and win. So good that we're getting some contending teams on the show, because we are always talking about house money teams and rebuilding teams. But this is a 10-team league, half PPR, 4 point per passing touchdown. You guys can see the team there. It is not a super flex by the looks of it. It's just a 1 quarterback league. So
Start
Burrow,
8.
Goff, and Tua start 8. Yeah, so very high priority on your starting roster. Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, very strong at running back. CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk, pretty strong at wide receiver as well. And then Mark Andrews as your main tight end. Doesn't have his one in 2023. Doesn't look like they've had their rookie draft yet. And also does not have his one in 2024, but he does have an extra second in that class. So, looking at this team, I probably am assuming you're thinking the same thing. I would personally try and get a little bit lighter at running back and get a little bit heavier at wide receiver. Austin Eckler is the name that stands out to me. Even though you're in a competitive window, Austin Eckler, I would think, will give you the best bang for your buck on a trade market, because Najee had a down season. Jonathan Taylor had a down season. Tony Pollard is, probably appropriately priced, I would say, in Dynasty right now. So for me, Austin Eckler, if you can transition Austin Eckler into a back-end wide receiver 1 type like T. Higgins or something, or maybe you can't get quite that high and you can get up, one of the competitive wide receivers, maybe a Cooper Kupp is on the low on your league market right now. I think that's the type of move that I would make with this team.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If a suggestion I would make is one that you did the inverse of with this first deal, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it with you guys, man. Like, I'm not a fan of this deal, giving up Devontae Smith for Najee Harris and the quote unquote upside of Irv Smith. Like, we don't even know where he's gonna be in the pecking order of the Bengals. We don't even know if he's gonna be the starting tight end. Like, we run the same, song and dance with Irv Smith like every single year, and every single year it kind of materializes the exact same way. So if he was like a major leverage point in this deal, sure. But even if, like, Devontae Smith is a late 3, early 4 type of startup pick, Najee Harris for the most part, more of like a 6th round startup pick. So for me personally, like, that difference alone isn't worth Irv Smith. Not to mention, I am at or higher on Devontae Smith according to the market, and I'm lower on Najee Harris according to the market. So for me personally, I got to keep it honest with you. I'm not a big fan of this first move, but I'll let you chime in as well.
Yeah, this kind of strikes me as the type of move you make when you're scared that you have 2 Eagles wide receivers on your team, and I would have been totally fine just holding those 2 guys. Or if you're going to sell Devontae Smith, you got to at least sell him for somebody within the same tier. Even if it is a running back, it probably should not have been Najee Harris. But I probably would have went to the DK Metcalf manager, to the T. Higgins manager, to the Jackson Smith and Jigba manager, somebody in the same relative range as Devontae Smith, and sold him for that, because I think you sold low on a guy that literally just had a wide receiver 1 season as a second-year receiver, for a guy that was banged up all year, who's a 25-year-old running back who we're not even sure is even good. So I definitely agree with Danny there. I would not have made that first trade. The other trade that he makes here, he sends away Kenneth Walker, George Pickens, and Cole Kmet in exchange for Kyle Pitts, the 205 and the 207. So
Great move.
looking at this trade at face value, I mean, Kyle Pitts for me is like a late second round startup pick. Especially, I mean, like this is just a regular non-tight end premium format. So maybe like an early third if you're a little bit lower on him, but I would still rather have him than Kenneth Walker. And I think, give or take, the difference between Kyle Pitts and Kenneth Walker is about George Pickens, and then the 205 and the 207 kind of just cancels out Cole Kmet there. So what are your thoughts on that trade?
Well, I like the trade a lot, but I am curious on the team that you sent. Like, what did you end up doing with Kyle Pitts? Because the 205 is gone, the 207 is still there. Kyle Pitts is gone. Like, did you pay Kyle Pitts plus the 205 for Mark Andrews? Is kind of what I'm gathering.
Maybe. I'm not sure exactly what he did here. He said, I also traded Pitts straight up for Mark Andrews, is what he has listed in the comments there. Okay. In a competitive window, I think that's fine. I personally would prefer Pitts, but I think that's probably fine there. He also said he traded Pacheco and his 2024 first for Eckler and Thielen. You're in a competitive team. I think that's fine. I mean, it's probably going to be a late pick anyway. And Eckler's there. He's going to be a stud, I would imagine, from a redraft perspective. And then he also has this trade listed here: Jerry Jeudy 203 and 205 for AJ Brown. I think that was a fine price. I think AJ Brown's probably worth a little bit, probably even potentially more than that.
Well, the thing I'm confused about is you ended up getting AJ Brown back, but you traded Brown in a first for Taylor in season, and then ended up getting Brown back. So luckily you got Brown back, but yeah, no, I am a little indifferent on some of the running back moves, which I mean is going to be expected from FSE, that we're not going to like the running back trades, but we're going to like the other, pass catching type of trades.
Yeah, it's tough because I think had you held Pitts and had you not traded for Eckler and you just kept Pacheco and stuff, I think you would have a little bit more longevity with this team versus like this year, like you said, you're trying to go all in, you're trying to win. That makes sense, but I don't want to do that before the season. Like, I understand if you want to do that during the season when, maybe you suffer, Jonathan Taylor's down for 7 games with a hamstring injury, and you really do need a running back to fill the shoes. At that point, if you wanted to make the Pacheco in the first trade for Austin Eckler, it makes a little bit more sense. But for me, like, preemptively doing it in case you didn't need to do it at all is something that I'm probably not likely to get in the habit of. And it also, I guess, means too that you made this Devontae Smith trade when AJ Brown wasn't on your team. So that makes even less sense to me why you made the Devontae Smith trade. Because at first I thought, oh, maybe you traded him away because you didn't want 2 Eagles wide receivers. But it looks like you traded away Smith before you actually acquired AJ Brown. So for me, I'm a little indifferent on some of the moves, but I mean, face value, your team is really good. Go and win your championship. I just would try and get a little bit less running back dependent. JT and Pollard are going to anchor your running back slots, no problem. Najee Harris can work into your flex, but I would rather have a wide receiver than Austin Eckler. And given the price that you paid for him, I would imagine he probably has a decent amount of value on the open market in your league as well. So those are kind of like our only qualms with the moves that you made. But I mean, you're probably going to be the best team in your league and go and try and win your championship.
Amen. And with that being said, I think we can move on to the next team. That's going to be from Slaatsquatch. You guys can see right now, start 9, 12 team format with 6-point passing touchdowns and a 0.5 tight end premium. Quarterbacks, you got Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Jacoby Brissett as the main guys there. Running backs, J.K. Dobbins, Devon Achane, David Montgomery, etc. there. Wide receivers is where it gets very juicy here. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Josh Downs, etc. there. And then at tight end, you do have a nice young building block with Greg Dulcich. Assuming you already had your 2023 draft. Actually, no, this looks like a startup team. And oddly enough, we actually critiqued one of the teams in this league last week on Dynasty Decisions with AJ. So I think it's another perspective of this startup.
Yeah, so if I recall from last week's Dynasty Decisions, the board was pretty sharp. Everybody kind of knew what they were doing. It is a super flex league, so I'm pretty worried that you have Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff and Jacoby Brissett as your main guys because those quarterbacks to me indicate that you're trying to compete, and I'm not sure your team is strong enough all around those quarterbacks to be able to compete, but it is encouraging knowing that this was a startup. And not like a league that's been going for multiple years where there could be potential monsters in this one. I mean, your receivers are going to carry you. Like, those guys are obviously studs and they have a ton of open market value, but you got a lot riding on Cousins, Goff, J.K. Dobbins, Montgomery, those type of guys, because you're probably going to be among the weakest people in your league with the quarterback and running back position. And with Greg Dulcich, he's no guarantee to hit either Gerald Everett, Hayden Hurst. I mean, I think this team could probably be a playoff team, but I'm a little concerned that you might not be like one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, your quarterback, you don't really have a huge difference maker, but you still have two guys, in my opinion, that if they stay healthy, Cousins, you can expect for fringe top 12 level production. Jared Goff with that offense should potentially, give you top 15 / mid QB2 type of production, which isn't the greatest, but because you have in this format, obviously a start 9 format, you have the star power at wide receiver with Chase, Lamb, Waddle, and Judy basically occupying those 2 wide receiver and 2 flex spots per week. And Dulcich, assuming he breaks out, assuming that tight end 1 role. Realistically, for me, the only spots, like I kind of mentioned, you're going to be scavenging for high point potential would be if your running backs ended up materializing. Let's say J.K. Dobbins is the guy that we both believe in from a talent perspective. Maybe get some more receiving work with Monken at the helm over there in Baltimore. Or, hypothetically, Devon Achane's the perfect fit for McDaniel's scheme, and he's the RB1 there in Miami. Or, with David Montgomery, maybe he assumes the Jamal Williams plus type of role where he can be the goal line back, but also contribute on third downs because he's got more of a receiving profile. And maybe hypothetically, they don't trust Gibbs to have that full role right away. So I do see paths for you potentially having, high point potential. But this is a team that with those wide receivers, and because it's a startup draft or out of a startup draft, I would be leaning towards trying to win with this team, given the fact that you kind of have to with the age of your quarterbacks.
Yeah, there's not really much leeway in terms of you can't really transition Kirk Cousins into a young quarterback without taking a major risk on a Will Levis or a Trey Lance or something like that. So for me, I'm a little nervous about that. I would say going after somebody that could materialize into a long-term quarterback for you, if it's, price appropriate, like maybe your second round pick and Khalil Herbert can get you Brock Purdy or something like that. I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. But I also, don't want to force things. If you don't need to go after another quarterback, you don't need to. I'm just thinking, long-term, Kirk Cousins is a little bit up there in age. Jared Goff, not necessarily the biggest job security type of option. I would potentially explore a move, but maybe that's something that you do in season if Purdy's maybe not on the field yet. Maybe he can come at a discount or something like that. Purdy is just generally a good trade target, in my opinion. So if you can get him for all it costs you is a second rounder and Romeo Dobbs or something, then it might be worthwhile to go after somebody like that. He also had a startup trade listed here. Nothing too exciting. He kind of just moved back a couple spots and got a couple extra picks in return for that. He said, just looking for an overall critique of this roster. He said he picked at the 11 spot, and he said it was a really sharp league, like we already talked about. Didn't want to pass on Chase and was hoping Kyler or Watson would fall. AJ took both of them, as we broke down with his team, and he said it was a third-round reversal. So he said he took Lamb thinking one of Stroud or Tua would fall to 302, and they did not. So all those guys, quarterbacks went fast and furious. He did not have a chance, really, to get a quarterback at value, and he said he didn't want to reach on Daniel Jones, so he took Waddle. Starting off your draft with Chase, Lamb, and Waddle is probably not a bad thing, no matter what.
Well, and I'm glad that you had the foresight to be able to, quote unquote, pick up your ego or pick up your chest at this point and realize hey, listen, I'm at the 11 pick, and typically knowing my strategy, I'm going to want 1 or 2 quarterbacks within these first 3 picks, but you're picking 11 and fucking Jamar Chase falls to you. You have to make that pick. You're picking at the 202, I'm assuming on the inverse, right? I'm assuming at that point, Kyler Watson went off.
Kyler and Watson went 112 and 201 when we broke down AJ's team. So that also means that Fields was off the board, that Lawrence was off the board. So you were at 202, you could have gone with Bryce Young. You could have gone potentially with Anthony Richardson or potentially Dak Prescott. But taking a guy in Lamb, I think it's an argument between those options. I might have gone quarterback in your position just because knowing I had Chase, I already had a young building block. I probably would have went with Bryce Young, but I understand going with Lamb there. It's not really something I'm going to debate too much.
Yeah, you can argue realistically, you taking one of the rookies or taking a Dak Prescott there, but like you kind of said with what Cory said, you're still getting a 23-year-old 1,300 plus receiving yard receiver. So realistically, although you miss out on the big quarterback value piece in the first 3 rounds, you still got 3 wide receivers that are all under 24 years old and are all going to be top 10 dynasty wide receivers, at least on the market for the next 3 or 4 years, probably 3 years. Cause once you get to 4, nobody's going to have them there once they're 27.
Yeah. Would you consider potentially dealing your first round pick if it meant you could get a RB2 and a quarterback?
Yeah.
Let's say somebody has Matthew Stafford and I'm trying to think.
Cam Akers.
Somebody's got the 2 Rams guys and you could sell your first round pick for both of them. I think that wouldn't be a terrible idea. Just knowing that you would give yourself some insurance at both positions because you're
something I'd wait to do though.
Yeah. There's no rush to do that move. You don't need to do that right now. I'm saying maybe week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, that team thought they could compete and can no longer compete. And all they care about is draft capital at that point. We've seen this shift a million times in dynasty leagues that we've played in. Once teams realize that they can't compete, suddenly they value draft capital, even though they might not have for the previous year and a half, 2 years that they've been in the dynasty league. It's like uncanny how quickly their mindset shifts.
It's so wild because I've even noticed leagues where like back in the day, like even a couple years ago, like you had guys, especially on the market, that your counter would be like, oh yeah, make that second into a first and I'll give you like a third back or something like that. And people would take those back in the day. Like, and it ended up being like, a fringe piece. You get a first out of it and you just throw them a 3 back. And then a couple years later, they start realizing, oh shit, like those firsts accumulate in value. Oh shit, those seconds accumulate in value. And now we've seen the market completely flip on its head. But of course, we've been so proactive these last couple of years that we've benefited off of it quite a bit.
Yeah, and motivated selling is really a big factor for
Yeah.
competitive teams and teams that can actually compete, because if you have 3 or 4 teams that realize that they can't compete, they're going to be motivated to sell their James Connors, to sell their Matthew Staffords, to sell, their Cooper Kupps, whatever assets that they have, and they'll take, 80 cents on the dollar just to make sure that they're making their team better, which we sometimes agree with. We think that's sometimes a good move, but at the same time, if they're not an experienced dynasty player, they might just sell Cooper Kupp for a single late first or something like that. Be like, oh, I needed a first round pick. And, obviously we know he's worth more than that. So, little side tangent, but we can move on to the next team here, which is from Panya, who is the last motherflocker who submitted. And then we'll get into some of the free submissions of this league or of this video. We have, I believe, a 12 team PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, 1 point tight end premium. So a 2 tight end premium. And of course, you have Kyle Pitts, who is obviously the guy that you want to have in this type of format. And it is a super flex league as well. So young quarterback core, not one that's probably likely to compete this year. Bryce Young and Will Levis with Kyler Murray, who's going to potentially be on the mend for a couple games. Roshan Johnson, Tajay Spears, Deuce Vaughn, Sean Tucker, very zero RB, minimal investment in those guys. Roshan's probably the highest pick that you made. And then DK Metcalf, Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Jaden Reed, Josh Downs, and all FSE team pretty much of receivers for the most part. The one thing I will say, and then Kyle Pitts, obviously at tight end, you do have 3 ones in 2024. You have 2 ones in 2025. I will say you're lacking some stud power outside of your quarterbacks. You don't really have a stud receiver. I guess Metcalf is kind of a stud. Watson, Dotson, those guys could become studs, but I worry that, long term, you don't have a superstar wide receiver, but it's possible you get a high pick this year and you take Marvin Harrison Jr.
Hear me out. Are you interested in potentially quote unquote downtuning your production to upgrade your longevity? If somebody's interested, this is a startup, so I don't know how possible this is, and I don't know the difference in valuation in your league between Metcalf and London, but that seems like a swap I would be fully interested in making, even if it cost you like a 2 for a 3 at that point, because people are still higher on Metcalf. I am starting to get a little bit worried with Metcalf. He's 25 years old at this point. I don't really know if he has that league winning, wide receiver 7 or better type of ceiling at this point, given the fact that he didn't really demand a lot of targets away from Tyler Lockett last year. Now you got JSN, who is the best target commanding wide receiver in this draft. I'm a little bit worried for what the actual upside is of DK Metcalf, not to mention a lot of faith being stored right now in Geno Smith just returning to play like he did last year. So a little bit of concerns there. If you can get a guy like Drake London, who I think even with a low projected passing offense should still be in the realm of 130, 140 plus targets as a sophomore wide receiver, I think there's going to be a point next year, and maybe this is a hot take, there may be a point where London is worth a first more than Metcalf on the market by this time next year.
Yeah, I mean, you could even swap Metcalf potentially straight up for his teammate if somebody's lower on Smith and Jigba, or I mean, I'm assuming they drafted him in the startup and they might have taken him over Metcalf, but it's possible even just I'd be willing to pay a little bit extra just to make sure that I have a potential long-term stud locked down. But either way, I mean, you're going to have a high pick next year. You don't really need a quarterback, so you could also, if you have like the 3rd pick or whatever, just take Marvin Harrison to head out your wide receiver core. And then obviously if you bump everyone down a spot, then it looks a lot better. So very good, like house money kind of shell for this team. He has a bunch of trades listed here. He said he just finished the startup and he wants to know what he did right, where he could have improved. He said, I know a ton of 2023 rookies. But it was clear pretty early on that I had no interest in contending. Given the trades happening, he wanted to at least do a 1-year punt. Also important to know that 2 teams in this league sold basically all of their picks through round 10 and own nearly all of the rookie picks. So there's guys tanking harder than him, but he's doing a 1-year punt. He's not necessarily, full tanking, trying to tear everything down. He still has a lot of great assets on this team, including 2 guys, potentially 3, that will lock down his quarterback core for the long term. So the trades he made during the startup, it looks like he sold the startup 106 and 1206. So he traded down from presumably like Lawrence or Herbert or something like that for the 205, which I would guess he probably took Bryce Young with or Kyler Murray with. And then he got
Kyler Murray in the next deal. So yeah, it was probably Bryce Young. So for contextualizing it, let's just say Trevor Lawrence plus 1206 Alexander Madison or something like that.
I mean, probably not even Alexander
Probably
Madison,
not now. Who would be going there now? Like Dalvin Cook?
Like Khalil Herbert, maybe?
Yeah. Okay, sure. We'll supplement that. So Trevor Lawrence plus Khalil Herbert, we'll just say hypothetically, in exchange for Bryce Young, Jahan Dotson, Jaden Reed, and a 24 first-round pick. It sounds like a pretty reasonable deal to make out of a startup, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, those stud quarterbacks are obviously going to hold a lot of value, but knowing you got a quarterback who I believe in long-term, who could absolutely be as valuable as those guys, whoever it ended up being, Lamar, Lawrence or whoever, I definitely think that was a pretty solid move, especially knowing that you netted a first. And then obviously at that point, your kind of decision was made. You move down for a young quarterback, you pick up a 2024 first, you're probably more likely to be in a 1-year punt, a rebuilding type of window. You then sold the 205. So I guess you didn't take Bryce Young with this pick. And the 1006, you go down to 309 and you get Kyler Murray, and the 909 being Josh Downs. So I'm guessing he took Bryce Young with his second round pick that he kept, because he picked that 106. He probably picked that 207 on the way back. That's probably where he picked Bryce Young. But then you end up netting another first and another third. So 205, I mean, like he probably moved up for Lamb, AJ Brown, maybe Anthony Richardson, maybe Dak Prescott. Getting Kyler, who I would be fine just taking at 205, let alone getting at 309 plus a first, Josh Downs, and a third. Definitely a great move there.
I will say quickly.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say, I will say quickly though, results wise, it worked out fantastic for you. But if he had taken Kyler with the 205 and then you're looking at like a wide receiver at the 309, then it becomes like a little bit of a discussion, because I do think you probably got to go on face value a little bit more from like the straight pick swaps. But the fact that you got Kyler, like I said, I mean, just makes it so that you smash it out of the park.
Yeah, but more realistically, if this was us making this trade, we're coming up for Kyler, and at 309, you might have gotten Jackson Smith and Jigba or something like that, and a first round pick, which is, I mean, still valuable, but you definitely would prefer Kyler there. So, 606, you traded down from. That's usually in that sweet spot of like the Jerry Jeudy, Ayuk type of receivers. 1606 as well, pretty useless pick overall, and then you got the 1005 and a 2024 first. I almost would, or 2025 first. Sorry, I almost say this is like the 1005 too strong. I think that like 2025 first, depending on where it's going to be, is probably equivalent value. So the fact that you also net Roshan out of that is pretty solid. He also said, besides his team, he said he's likely that he could out tank them still for the 101. But I will say you're probably, if they sold all their like startup picks, they're probably going to out tank you, which is actually not the worst thing in the world for you, because that means that you're probably going to have the 103 with your own pick, and you could use Marvin Harrison Jr. So it's not the worst thing in the world. Hopefully with those other first rounders and those mid rounders you have, you can fill out your running back core. I think you could be like a pretty solid house money team this time next year if you're able to hit on your picks. But that's pretty much where I'm at with this team. He said, what are some moves that you'd make off the bat? I would say potentially moving off of DK Metcalf is the only one that stands out to me. Your biggest error in the draft, I would say that you didn't really make too many. I would say, like Danny said, it was maybe a bad process trade, the second one, but it definitely worked out for you. And then especially given that you got Kyler Murray at 309, I think you did pretty well with this league. And we got to remember too, like Kyle Pitts in a 2 tight end premium is a very, very valuable asset. So it's possible he actually took him at the 207 and he got Bryce Young even later.
Wow. I mean, like I would assume that it was probably Kyle Pitts that fell, but like either way, the fact that you got him on this team, phenomenal move there. Like Cory kind of said though, I would say your house money right now, you have a few firsts to be able to add to the running back position specifically, because I do think maybe you add one more building block with one of those first, but I definitely pigeonhole at least 2 of them probably for a strong running back class. So hypothetically, if you walked out of next year and you had, Trayvon Henderson and Trey Benson added to your running back core hypothetically, or you have a wide receiver, a Emeka Egbuka added to this wide receiver core, then you're looking at it and you're like, hey, I got the gold standard himself, Kyle Pitts at tight end. I got two strong difference-making quarterbacks with maybe some upside for a third quarterback if Will Levis shows out in his rookie year. And then at that point, you just need your young rookie running backs to be able to churn out a competitive roster, which, given the state of the NFL and given the state of how the running back position works, running backs who are selected highly, you're talking about top 50 overall picks, which two of those first round picks should be able to net you in the rookie draft, are typically going to be, 200 plus, 300, maybe not 300 plus, but 200 plus, 250 plus type of touch workloads as soon as their rookie seasons, because the NFL is starting to realize we need the production early from running backs because we're probably not going to sign them long term.
Yeah, and if you have, let's say Roshan hits and he's like a solid RB2 for you, you add Benson, you add Travion Henderson, you add, Harrison with that your own first, and you still have the buying power of a 2025 extra one as well. So you could also go out and buy it at that point. If your team is kind of materialized and it's looking like you can compete, you could make that move at that point. So I would say, yeah, your team's in a house money window this time next year, assuming you hit on your rookie picks, and that's pretty much the assessment that I would make. So moving on to team number 5. This is the first free submission that we have of the video. We'll try and speed these up a little bit. We have Cory's team here, 12 team, 1 PPR, 4 point per passing touchdowns, not a super flex league, a start 8. So again, very heavy on the starting lineup is what we want to focus on here. Dak Prescott is his main quarterback, Trey Lance in the back burner, Breece Hall, Cam Akers, AJ Dillon, Isaiah Pacheco, Damian Harrison, company there at running back, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Marquise Brown, George Pickens, Elijah Moore at wide receiver, and then Mark Andrews as main tight end. So I would say, looking at this team, you have a very strong foundation, a very strong starting lineup, in addition to the 102 this year, which, given your team, I would try and get 101. This is the team I would try and, do that with, because you're, very strong at quarterback, very strong at tight end, very strong at wide receiver, although maybe, you're risking it a little bit, hoping that Pickens and more, materialize, but it's a shallow starting lineup. So even if they don't, you probably don't need them to. But at 102, obviously, if you can't move up to 101, you just take Jahmyr Gibbs. But I would consider, selling all my rookie picks this year just for Bijan Robinson. 102, 111, and 202. I'd be totally fine giving them all for Bijan Robinson.
100%. He did say in the comment that he's tried multiple trades for 101, but the guy doesn't seem interested. Do you see, you have Breece Hall, but do you see if the 102 can get you John? I actually have Jahmyr Gibbs ranked higher. I would just take Jahmyr Gibbs.
If you can't get Bijan, I would just take Gibbs.
I contextualize it as if we were talking about pre-NFL draft, but actually, I'm not sure if you saw my rankings over on Flock, but I did recently make a pretty big move. Jahmyr Gibbs is my running back 2 in Dynasty. So for me personally, getting him here at the 102, he is the RB2 in Dynasty for me now. So
yeah, there's no way I would take him over Breece, but if you wanted to say you take him over Jonathan Taylor, I kind of understand that, I suppose.
With Breece, sorry, I had a quick moniker on that. With Breece, if I hear fully going into the season that he's ready to go and he's ready week 1, he's my 3 right now, and I have no problem raising him back up to 2.
If Edwin's not concerned, I'm not concerned. So I'm probably going to stick with Breece is probably a good value in redraft. And if he's a good value in redraft, he's absolutely a good value in Dynasty, given his age and the offense he's attached to. But side conversation there. If you can't get the 101, I'm fine just going after Gibbs and adding him to this team. He said, I have ongoing trade discussions on trying to obtain a top 5 running back for 2023, doing a deal with 102 as the base. I would honestly just pick Gibbs. If you can get Jonathan Taylor plus for the pick, then maybe. But at the same time, people are probably going to want more from you, I would imagine. They'd probably be 102 plus for Jonathan Taylor rather than Jonathan Taylor plus for 102 is what I would imagine. He said everybody's in a redraft contender mindset. So that means just pick the rookie running back because they're going to be lower on him than you probably are. So he said he feels like he's a potential top 4 team, has a few upside and unknown players, looking for any advice on players to target if I can just be patient, see how things fall the first few weeks and flow from there. That's probably the approach that I would take. He said coming out of a rebuild with top picks the last few years, just trying to figure out when to make the move. And he also made a trade here. Last season, he sold Aaron Jones and Kareem Hunt for CeeDee Lamb. This, I'm assuming, was when Dak Prescott was hurt because CeeDee Lamb had the lowest fucking market value of all time when that happened. But this is a steal, dude. This is the definition of a redraft mindset league. And given that, I would really, really encourage you to just spend your rookie picks because it's probably likely that veteran production is way, way overpriced in a league market like this. So if you spend that 102 on Jahmyr Gibbs, at 111, you come back around, maybe somebody, one of the top receivers falls to you, like a Zay Flowers. If they're redraft mindset guys, they might look at the Baltimore Ravens offense and not want a guy like Zay Flowers, and he would help fill out your wide receiver core. Your team's in a really good spot. You're going to be able to compete this year and have a very young nucleus to build around.
What I would honestly be doing with the 111, the only issue would be is that you said not a lot of people are willing to give up future first. But if you dangled around the 111 plus the 202 to a team that views himself as a contender, but you kind of view as like the lower end spectrum of that, and it could be a mid pick. If you can transition the 111 plus the 202 into a middle projected type of 2024 first, and then at that point, given the trade that I just saw there for CeeDee Lamb, you got guys like Isaiah Pacheco, Damian Harris, Rashad Penny, where in season, if you want to try to, shop those guys off, so you would already have your nucleus, quote unquote, built around, Breeze, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then insert one of Dylan or Cam Akers, to the point where, like I said, you have some leverage pieces to move off of those, some of those, middle running backs you have. You have a lot of depth at running back right now, which is both a solid thing if you're ready fully to compete, or vice versa. Like I said, if you're ready to liquidate, if you're ready to get, maybe 3 of those guys into a 2024 first, hypothetically, at that point, you have way more buying power for the future once your team's fully set. But you're asking if you can win with this team. I absolutely think you can, assuming you add Jahmyr Gibbs with that 102.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be opposed to taking Trey Lance or Dak Prescott and throwing in the 111 or the 202 and trying to get a better quarterback too. If you it's a one quarterback league, so it probably shouldn't cost you too much. If Trey Lance and the 111 gets you to Deshaun Watson or Kyler Murray, then I think that's definitely a great move that you could make to this team as well. Because as good as Dak Prescott is, he's probably more of like your back end QB1 than he is like a top 5 ceiling quarterback. So if you could get somebody that has a bit of a higher ceiling like Kyler Murray on the cheap, which we know he's very cheap in most leagues, Trey Lance and the 111 might be enough to get that done.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. But overall, again, you have the major building blocks. I would say right now, maybe realistically, maybe you want one more wide receiver. But I mean, aside from that, like,
it's a shallow starting lineup, though. So, like, your starting lineup is going to be Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb in your wide receiver slots no matter what. And then you're just talking about mixing in guys to your flex, like Marquise Brown's probably going to be a stable asset there. One of George Pickens and Elijah Moore probably gives you flex production, give or take. And then also you have some of these running backs, Pacheco, Dylan, whatever guy is not in your RB2 slot to be able to work in there as well. So your team's in a really good spot. You're in a position where you can both compete and you have a pretty solid young nucleus long term.
Yeah, 100%. If you can keep this nucleus together and, like I said, try to consolidate some of those middle tier running backs that you have into either future first equity, or come season time, say a big name running back or a big name wide receiver gets hurt for a few weeks and a contender needs some production points, and you can say, hey, listen, Isaiah Pacheco's the running back 13 right now in fantasy, and he has 5 touchdowns through 6 weeks in KC. You want to trade for him? Hey, Damian Harris is the goal line back in Buffalo, and he's working, 14 carries a game. You want to trade for him? Oh, Rashad Penny's gotten off to a classic Rashad Penny start, and he has 413 rushing yards in the first 5 weeks. Do you want to trade for him? Those are the type of instances that even contenders will see in season, and they can use to try to consolidate their roster. So if all 3 of those guys together, somebody might be looking at, oh, well, this is really good depth that can be added into my team. This Jonathan Taylor I have, or this AJ Brown I have, or this fucking
J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams I have.
Yeah, exactly. If you can use those production pieces to consolidate in season, this team is going to be a monster.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good job. You've definitely built up this thing really well. We can move on to Roderick's team, who came in 4th last year. He wanted to get younger, and he said, how do I proceed with the rebuild? So it looks like he's trying to tear it down. 12-team, half PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown league. Also has a 0.5 tight end premium and a super flex. So Kyler, Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, little light at quarterback, especially after Kyler Murray, and especially knowing that none of those guys are really going to help you this year just because Kyler's going to be injured. Dameon Pierce, Aaron Jones, Antonio Gibson, Kendre Miller, Chase Brown, Devontae Smith, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Williams, Marquise Brown, Jaden Reed, and company there, running backs and wide receivers. And then Chigakonkwo and some other guys, Darnell Washington, Juwan Johnson, some upside pieces there at tight end. So team's caught a little bit in limbo. Like he said, he's trying to tear it down. He's trying to rebuild this thing. So Aaron Jones and Dameon Pierce, guys that need to probably be off your roster at some point this season, whether they're, you sell them now, whether you sell them after week 3 or whatever, like you probably need to offload those players because they're going to be more valuable to a contender than they are to you. Even though Dameon Pierce is young, I don't really want to hold him in your situation. And then Kyler Murray, Kenny Pickett, and Sam Howell, you're probably going to need to add another stable quarterback to that group because there's no guarantee that Sam Howell will be very valuable after this season. So he might be another guy that you maybe want to move off of in like a package trade. If somebody wanted, Aaron Jones and Sam Howell for like a first round pick or for a stable asset, a wide receiver or something like that, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to something like that. So you got a lot of micro moves to make, and we can kind of go over some of the ones that he's made already. Deshaun Watson and Adam Thielen, he sent away for Devontae Smith, Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, and a third. So in a rebuild, I'm typically more likely to lean on the side of an elite asset with Deshaun Watson in this trade. Do I think this trade is decent? Sure. I think Devontae Smith, worth about a first round pick less than Deshaun Watson. Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett probably makes up that difference. But I think in your situation, I probably would have just held Watson.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I see it as well. It's like on face value, if you were to, package or quote unquote add up the total accumulation of assets, like, yeah, like you said, Deshaun Watson will say give or take, 2.5 first, last 3 first, given the market. It fully depends on what your league kind of views him, but that's about where I would say his base is. Devontae Smith, I'd probably peg it at about what, a first and a half, I think we have him as.
Yeah, first and half. If you add Devontae Smith and Kenny Pickett together, it's like 2 1s and a 2. Probably. And then Sam Howell worth a second round pick, and then you get the third for Thielen. Like, it's probably a fair trade. I just think Deshaun Watson was probably the better asset to hold long term. It's pretty much where I'm at.
100% agree. And like this is the type of deal where, a trade calculator might just look at the total net of assets, whereas for us, we always talk about like using that to your advantage, like getting rid of a roster spot and consolidating is going to be more valuable to you than quote unquote adding depth, especially in the format we have here, a start 10, 12 team league. It's not like, it's a start 12 or 13 where you need as many, valuable pieces as possible.
Yeah, but I mean, you got 2 upside swings at quarterback. If one of those guys becomes a stable asset, then this trade probably looks a lot better for you. In the next trade, you sent away McCaffrey, Geno Smith, Elijah Mitchell. So the 49ers backfield and Geno Smith. In exchange, this is a better trade because, I mean, this is the opposite of what you just did. You got Kyler Murray in a mid-first for 2 guys, basically McCaffrey and Geno Smith, and then Mitchell's just kind of like a handcuff, where those guys are going to be A, more valuable to a contender, and B, volatile assets. If Geno Smith looks like the Geno Smith he was for 10 seasons before last year, he's not going to be worth a whole lot. If McCaffrey gets injured again, he's probably not going to be worth a whole lot. So Kyler Murray being a guy that we think is probably the best buy in all of Dynasty right now, and 2024 mid-first as well. I mean, the mid-first pretty much cancels out Geno Smith easily and Elijah Mitchell, and then you got Kyler Murray for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, no, heartbeat deal. I absolutely love that move, especially given the position your team is in. And then finally, you sent Kittle on a third for Brown and Gibson. I like the structure of this deal. Now, in terms of the actual micro names, do I think that a 26-year-old wide receiver and a 24-year-old running back is what you kind of needed to do to break it down? No. Like, I personally would have tried to either go for picks or maybe a younger player. Like, I take it for a grain of salt, but like, who's like a similar tier to Marquise Brown, only young, like George Pickens, maybe?
Yeah, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, maybe. Somebody like that would probably have made more sense. But I mean, you got younger, you got a little bit more liquid. Antonio Gibson, if you replaced his name with a second rounder, I would probably like this deal a lot more.
Agreed.
But either way, I think you did a decent job there. So looking at, like, you obviously have some work to do. You've kind of acknowledged that in your question. But that's basically, you're on the right path. You're making some decent moves so far. And I would say, given some of these trades, it looks like your league market does gear towards more of like a redraft centric league. So any players like Mike Williams, Dameon Pierce, Aaron Jones, some of the guys that you have there, I would potentially see what they can fetch you on the trade market. Your goal is to get picks, ideally. And if they don't want to give you 2024 picks because they know about Caleb Williams, they know about, these guys, then aim for 2025 picks because your team, with the way you have it built so far, is probably going to still have its building blocks, Kyler Murray, Kenny Pickett, Devontae Smith, those type of guys in 2025 as well. So I would aim for 2025 capital if you can't get 2024. But I think we could probably move on to the next team here, which is from Bobby. He says first year in Dynasty needs some help rebuilding. He was hoping to be competitive by 2024. or 2025, give or take. Love the channel. Also has 3 taxi spots.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, you guys. So no problem. Love breaking down these teams. 12 team.
Yeah.
Half PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, half tight end premium. It is a super flex league. Lamar Jackson and Geno Smith are his only startable quarterbacks, though. And then running backs are pretty barren with P. Ryan and Jerick McKinnon, those type of dudes. Brandon Ayuk, Jahan Dotson, Traylon Burks, Zay Flowers, Darnell Mooney. So not a ton of like stud capital assets here. Mark Andrews, obviously, very studly at the tight end position, but you do have 4 first-round picks in 2024, an additional first in 2025, an additional second in each of those years, an additional third in each of those years. So a lot of pick capital. I would say by 2025 is probably more likely when you can compete, not 2024. Once you spend those 2024 picks, once those guys are going into their second years, you add in the 2025 rookies as well. That's probably when I'm more looking to build this thing out. Given that analysis, I would say that Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are probably guys I might be looking to move off of, especially Andrews because he's a little bit older. But Jackson, if you can swap him for Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, because they're of similar value but much younger, you might be able to get a plus on top of that as well. If somebody's high on Lamar Jackson, maybe you can get Lawrence in a second or Lawrence in a young upside tight end or receiver or running back. That's probably what I would be looking to do. And maybe you could sell the package together. Maybe it's a contender and they're going to give you, Justin Fields and 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews because they want to compete and they want to shove their chips into the middle. That would also be something I would look for.
It's so funny how lockstep we were there because, like, the first thing I noticed is, like, yeah, you're competing 24-25. Keeping an older tight end like Andrews is not on the cards. And, like you kind of said, like, I have no problems holding Lamar Jackson if people are valuing him as the guy who's, missed time these last couple years and he's injury prone and new offense. I don't know how he's going to adapt or he can't throw the football. Like, there's going to be so many narratives in some leagues based on Lamar. Like, he can't throw a football past 15 yards. Why would I want him on my dynasty team? And it's like, yeah, well, once he starts giving you top 3 to 5 overall quarterback production, people are going to start to realize. But that's not for your concern. You gauge the market. If somebody's willing to give you, like you said, a transition of Trevor Lawrence or maybe Fields plus might be available given their startup ADP, I'd look into it. But if some of the deals are like, I don't know, fucking CJ Stroud plus a 2. Like then at that point, just kind of say no and keep your 27-year-old superstar quarterback. So yeah, Lamar, I would say, like Cory mentioned, is a tentative sell given the value that you can see. Mark Andrews, for the most part, I do think is kind of a hard sell on this team because of the fact that you don't really have a wide receiver over 24 years old. You don't really have a single running back. So I do think once you use those 2024 picks and those rookies come in, that'll be the start of your window. The only problem with that is Mark Andrews might reach, George Kittle level territory in terms of where his valuation on the market is. And
that's assuming he still produces at a high level because, he's going to turn 28 week 1 this year and he'll be 30 probably by the time your team is ready to compete in 2025. So I would say, yeah, Mark Andrews probably needs to be a sell. Aim for a young tight end, aim for just picks. I would probably just go for picks if I were you, knowing that, we have some good tight end prospects in 2024, especially with Brock Bowers. You could just add him to your team for a young tight end. And I like just going cheap at that position anyway. So
Same.
Andrews would definitely be a hard sell. But overall with this team, you're kind of just trusting the process. Ayuk, Dotson, Burks, Zay Flowers, hopefully they work out as like studs for you long term. But I probably wouldn't be motivated to move any of them. I think they're probably all fine holds. And then the running back position, as we always say with like rebuilding teams, if P. Ryan has a stretch of games where he's the starter, if Jerick McKinnon's in a good spot to be the starter, whatever, Devon Achane's and Roschon Johnson are buried down there as well. Even if they were, if A-Chain starts off his career with like massive, breakaway touchdowns or something, you could flip him for a first round pick real quick because people are excited about him. I wouldn't be opposed to something like that as well. So you're in a pretty good spot. You just need to, spend those picks, keep trusting the process and that kind of thing. So Mr. Keeves is the last team that we're going to talk about here. 12 team, half PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, super flex. Joe Burrow, Derek Carr is his main quarterbacks. Doesn't really have a quarterback 3 to speak of. Breece Hall and some other guys there at running back. T. Higgins, Ayuk, Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney, and company at wide receiver. Chig Okonkwo and some other guys there at tight end. Basically says that those early picks are mine since he's planning on tanking, and all the lates probably vary between 6 and 12. He said he's pretty active trading compared to others, and now just not sure what to do. He's thinking maybe flip Derek Carr. He said he's tried, but no luck, and maybe tear down with Higgins, obviously. And he said, and obviously, if I can move Fournette and Hunt once they sign or something like that, he'll do that as well. So pretty good understanding, I would imagine, for what he should be doing. And I would say you're probably accurate in those assessments as well. Derek Carr, maybe people need to see it first. I'm not sure why people wouldn't be interested in him for like I don't know. It'd be difficult to get a first round pick for Derek Carr. Like realistically, he's not somebody that moves the needle a ton. But if a contender needs, wide receiver depth, running back depth, whatever, and you can flip Derek Carr and new Bengals running back Kareem Hunt once he signs, then maybe you could get a first round pick out of that or something like that. So I would say using Derek Carr in a package deal would probably be the best way to sell him. If you're looking to do that. But yeah, I mean, this team's in pretty rough shape, I would say, because you only have 2 first-round picks, and yeah, one of them is going to be early. You probably get Drake May or Caleb Williams or something like that. You're still not going to have the adequate picks to fill out your depth unless you hit on a bunch of your mid-rounders. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just gonna say I am a little bit confused because I feel like in the assessment portion and the write up that you provided, everything is like put together and makes a lot of sense. But then on March 16th, you traded away a young quarterback asset when you already are planning on trading away Derek Carr for T. Higgins. I get it. Like T. Higgins, young wide receiver, valuable. But the difference
Stack
between
him with
CJ
Burrow.
stacks with Burrow, but if you're not competing, that stack's not really going to mean much to you anyway. So for me personally, I'm looking at it as like CJ Stroud and TJ Higgins are about an equal, if not CJ Stroud is worth more on the market. And then you're also giving up a potential, young 24-year-old stacking option with him with Nico Collins that I think that come the season time, if you wanted to move either of those pieces or those pieces together, probably could have netted you, 2+ firsts, maybe. Like we're looking at 2 firsts and a second, maybe even 3 firsts if you're lucky, if you attach a second to your side. I just don't really like the timing of making this deal personally, given the window you already planned for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. If I was going to sell CJ Stroud, I would probably want future pick capital
Yeah.
or a different quarterback or
Well,
whatever. Like I would be looking for something, or even if you're going to go after a receiver, you should have gone after, somebody young, Drake London, Chris Olave, somebody like that.
Well, I'll show you an example in a league where I didn't think I was ready to compete come 2023. I've told you the trade before, but similar deal is I traded the 103 in that league, which was Bryce Young, and I got 2 projected mid first in 24 and 25. I'm assuming that was also in a sharper league, so I'm assuming in a more casual league that deal, if not even a little bit better, probably was available to you to trade CJ Stroud.
Yeah, for sure. So the next trade he made here, 203, which became Michael Mayer, he sold off for Wandale and Zach Evans. I personally would have preferred Michael Mayer.
Yeah.
I think especially in your position, you're not a competitive team. You have opportunity to let a good, great tight end prospect like Michael
Yeah.
Mayer develop. I'm not. I like Wandale Robinson, but I'm not super high on him to the point that I would basically sell him for like an early second and like the 309 Zach Evans. If you like Zach Evans, whatever. But for me, I probably would have just kept the better asset with Michael Mayer or punted the second into next year or something if you wanted to do that. But overall, not like the worst trade. This trade's a lot better. Mike Evans and Jaden Reed, you sold for a late first next year. I think that was a pretty solid move because you can use that first on, Brock Bowers. You can use that first on, a wide receiver prospect, maybe a Malik Neighbors or a Xavier Worthy or something next year. You have options there. So this team, you're definitely going to need to do some more work. Like we talked about with the last team, you got to sell some more players. Derek Carr, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, if they sign, if they're worth anything. Anybody that's worth anything is probably on the trade market for me in this league. He also mentioned, like, should I trade down from T. Higgins for like a young receiver? I mean, if you can get JSN in a first for T. Higgins in a second, then yeah, I would do something like that.
Yeah, with ease. Like you want to do it. Would you stretch that even to Quentin Johnson or Jordan Addison? Because I probably
Maybe
would too.
Addison, but not Johnston.
Let's say Jordan Addison plus a first for T. Higgins plus a 2. I think I'd be willing to do that as well.
I'd probably be willing to do that as well, especially if the team is like not the best team in the league. They might be, but if they're like a mid to late, not like a guaranteed late first, I would definitely be willing to do that.
Yeah, I honestly think like realistically, outside of Joe Burrow, if somebody's willing to offer market value or higher on any of your assets, I'd be willing to sell because, like you kind of said, you're already anticipating that 2024 first to be early, so you may as well make plans to fit your team around that.
Yeah, and if it's a redraft centric league and Breece Hall looks like himself, you'll probably get at least 2 firsts for him.
Yep.
I would imagine as well. If he's out there week 4 and he has like a 30-point game and he looks fine, people are gonna be willing to give you a 2024 first and a 2025 first and potentially more on top of that for Breece Hall. And yeah, Breece Hall's young and he could still be relevant by the time you're ready to compete. But at the same time, this team needs a lot of work. You don't really have a ton of stud assets on this team. You still need quarterbacks. You still need, wide receivers. And then you can address your running back and tight end position. So it's probably going to be at least 2025 by the time you're ready to see the fruits of your labor. And by that point, Breece Hall will be 24 years old, about to get extended or hit the open market for the New York Jets. And then maybe he's not quite as valuable as he is right now. So I'd personally be potentially willing to cash out on him if you can get good value. If you can't, wait till he's healthy and then maybe sell him. But if he starts the season off hot and he looks like himself, you could probably get quite a bit for him in a trade. So we went a little long on this one. Hopefully you guys made it to the end. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, comment any of your thoughts down below. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you want your team featured on Dynasty Decisions episodes, go down to the Google form down below and fill out these templates that we've shown on the screen. You guys can do that and skip the line. If you are a flockfantasy.com member, by using the promo code FSE, you get first priority to these videos. If you're a mother flocker, if you're a flocker, you skip the free submissions. And then if you just want to submit a free submission and, wait your turn or whatever, you can also do that. Or if you've submitted a team previously and you didn't, have it covered yet, please let us know that in the free submissions as well. And we will try and get to some of you guys that have been waiting since February and, March and stuff, because I'm sure we didn't get to your teams if you were a free submission there. So with that being said, peace out and we'll talk to you soon.